I have this intellectual thing where I say to myself, you know, I would date a transgender man. I also know that I don't know what that would be like. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for another episode of True Tea. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me yet again on this channel for True Tea. I really appreciate those of you guys who are here every single week and have decided to make True Tea part of your weekly routine. If you're brand new to this channel, what we'd like to do is learn, share, and grow through education and conversation, and that is what we're doing here, the conversation portion. We like to just have open conversations where we are just sharing our feelings, our experiences, and all that jazz, and hopefully we can sort of learn something from each other. I know that I have a lot to learn, and you know, this is just sort of the space for people who enjoy learning. Now, if you're a fan of True Tea and you like these videos, I would highly suggest that you support me on Patreon because I do upload True Tea videos way ahead of time. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, go to the description box and, you know, see how you could, you know, support me. Supporting this channel really does mean an absolute lot to me. Times are a little rough. It's the summer, so I would appreciate, you know, any little help that I can get. So yeah, anyway, let's jump into this video. But before we do, I would highly suggest, as I usually do, to go to your kitchen and grab yourself some tea. Now, personally, I am drinking some youthberry tea, if you can't tell from the pink hue of my drink, and it is very, very warm in this apartment, so I'm probably going to be sipping this quite a bit. I might even jump up and get some more tea. I don't know, but y'all are just gonna have to bear with me because I'm melting. So let me take a big sip and then let's get into this video. So we're gonna be having a conversation that a lot of people have requested that I have. A lot of you guys have asked me to talk about this, but to be honest, I've been a little nervous about discussing it. You know, I don't want to sound ignorant. I don't want to say things that are hurtful, but True Tea is all about me being honest and real. And so I felt like I would be honest and real about this subject and maybe accept the blowback if I get any. We're going to be talking in this video about why I have not dated a transgender man. So I want to say that I'm nervous about having this conversation because there are so many parallels, right, to how people could talk about me. And I don't want to say things that make people dysphoric or make people upset. But again, this was a really requested video and I felt like, you know, I needed to come and say how I felt. So one of the reasons why I made this video is because I've, throughout this series, spoken a lot about men. And a lot of times when I've discussed men, it's been cis men, right? I haven't, I remember I got a comment that was like, you don't mention trans men when you mention dating men. Do you not think that trans men are men? And to be honest, I didn't really understand that particular reading of my conversations about men. You know, I am a very social woman who is unfortunately quite tragically straight, and I go out a lot and men talk to me, and it, you know, it is what it is. And most of those men are cis, right? It's not like I've actively rejected trans men. It's not like I have on any of my dating profiles, trans men don't contact me. It's just that I haven't really had a lot of experiences. Now, I will be very, very, you know, forthcoming and honest with you guys and say that there was definitely a time in my life where I did write trans men off completely and totally. But right now, I definitely have recognized that I could date trans men. Now, one of the things that I think is so relevant in a lot of conversations we have about dating preferences is that I personally sort of believe that a lot of people's minds are opened up when they're exposed to certain things. You know, when I sort of had my opinion that I would not date trans men, the sort of trans men that I met just happened to be trans men that I wasn't attracted to. But since then, I've been exposed to several trans men that I have found attractive, and that's helped me sort of put the pieces together and understand that I would probably date a trans guy. I just haven't met one yet that I would. Now, there's a parallel here because in my own personal life, I've definitely been a lot of men's first transgender experience. And that's always been something that well, not always. There was definitely a time where when I was younger and I was a guy's first time experience, it was like a badge of honor, you know, like it was something to be proud of. Now I've with time recognized that men are not worth that amount of, you know, excitement. But for a while, I really sort of felt like, you know, if I was a guy's first, it was this sort of big thing, right? Now, the problem that I've kind of experienced with being men's first is that when you are someone's first experience, there's always that risk that they may try something and totally withdraw. They may actually be interested in you. They may actually be attracted to you, but when it comes to doing anything, you know, they may shut down. And I've had several experiences like this. I've had several experiences where I'm talking to a guy, he's really, really interested in me. I'm really, really interested in him. He's attracted to me. He either knows that I'm trans or I tell him that I'm trans. And he's like, cool, I'm okay with that. And then, you know, we get down to business and he freaks out. Just freaks out and can't do it, right? Can't do it. And as a trans person, that's been particularly painful. I mean, honestly, I sort of have to go through life right now, sort of swallowing the fact that I'm gonna have a lot of exchanges and interactions with men who are very, very attracted to me, but are unwilling to pursue me because I'm not cisgender. I have several men in my life right now who, you know, we get along, we like each other, there's mutual attraction, but our relationship can only go so deep because they can't get over the trans thing. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not nice to me. That doesn't mean that they're not kind to me, but it does mean that ultimately they are not willing to be what I, you know, want. And that is sometimes really upsetting. It is sometimes very upsetting for me to be in situation upon situation upon situation where I'm given this sort of like, I see what could happen, right? I see where we could go and what I could do and what sort of relationship I would have. And then my transness completely contradicts it or completely cancels it out. You know, men would be willing to give me the world, at least they said that they would. But then they find out that I'm trans and it's suddenly like, oh, well, And that's really, really, really painful for me. So I'll be honest and say that I'm definitely attracted to trans men. I mean, I matched with this trans guy on OkCupid the other day. I have my OkCupid set to include transgender men. And he was really, really handsome. And I will say, and this is part of the problem with this conversation, I think it is relevant. And I know that this is something that's probably really hurtful to hear for some people, but the trans men that I tend to be attracted to look like the cis men that I tend to be attracted to. You know, I am very kind of attracted to the kind of men that look like they could throw me across the room, okay? I know that it sounds, you know, but I like what I like, you know? I like what I like, you know? I like a good bearded man, you know, maybe a guy who's a little thick a little bit, you know, a little cuddly or whatever. I like a big sort of, you know, man. And the kind of trans men that I found myself attracted to look like that. And I know that there's a conversation here about whether or not that is transphobic or sexist or, you know, all these other things, but that's how I feel. And one of the issues that I've had with having this conversation and having other conversations is that I find that people often want to over politicize some of these conversations about attraction, you know? A lot of times we have these conversations and people say, oh, you know, if you were really on board with all this stuff, none of these things would matter. I mean, and we have a similar conversation when it comes to discussions of trans women. I remember when I did a video with my ex, right? And it got reposted on all these LGBT sites, right? A lot of people were upset because he was willing to openly claim a trans person, but a trans person who was passable or who was read as cis, right? That's who he was willing to claim. And he probably wouldn't have had a similar relationship with someone who wasn't that way, you know? And so the sort of frustration I get when we have this conversation is I understand the criticism of, you know, sometimes when we express these things, it says that it makes it seem like the only people who deserve relationships are the people who pass. The only people who deserve relationships are the people who look cis. I do get that. I also don't really know where we could take this conversation because, to be honest, I've been in a lot of situations where, again, men have made exceptions for me. They like cis women. They've all throughout their life been exclusively interested in cis women. They meet me and they're attracted to me. They're interested in me. They want to go and they want to pursue something with me. But what ends up happening is it's too much of a square peg in a round hole. You know, they will, in what their mind might be, put aside their usual preferences, put aside their general desires to pursue something with me. And oftentimes, because I'm not what they're used to, because I'm not what they usually like or what they usually want, it doesn't work out. And so my sort of thing with a lot of people who do this, like, well, you shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't have these conversations or people shouldn't have certain preferences, is I personally, because I've been through it several times, think that it's a lot more hurtful to date somebody who sort of has these feelings about something but has put them aside, only to have them ultimately be like, yeah, I like what I like. You know, that's not a dynamic that I want to be in, right? And so I have this intellectual thing where I say to myself, you know, I would date a transgender man. I also know that I don't know what that would be like. And I'll be real and say that sometimes my hesitation with pursuing transgender men does come from what I know it feels like to be a person who someone is attracted to physically, but they just can't do it. To me, that's so painful, that's so hurtful. And I worry about putting trans men in a position where maybe I am attracted to them, maybe I do have an interest in them, maybe we do really get along, but maybe, I don't know actually, because I've never been in this situation, maybe I just can't do it, I don't know. And that I don't know sort of space makes me feel really nervous, because again, I don't want to hurt someone in the way that I've been hurt. And so that's been really the reason why I haven't dated a trans guy. The guy that I matched with on OkCupid the other day, he was very, very cute. And unfortunately, he was just visiting. I do know. I was about to complain about people who use dating apps while they travel. But then I remembered that when I was in London, I went on like 3 dates with guys on Tinder. So I'm a hypocrite. What else is new? He was traveling. So, you know, he may or may not be back in town. I don't know. But that's kind of a rare rare situation. It's very, very rare that I have even come across a trans guy. I mean, even in all of the sort of sex positive, you know, gothy, body positive, BDSM-y spaces that I exist in, even in all these spaces, I think I've probably only ran into maybe 3 trans men at tops, at least that I've known of. Probably 3. I think 3 is a good number. And I've been out here for 2 years, you know. I just don't find that I run into trans men very often, you know? And I'm the sort of person where I do like for things to be sort of organic. One of the reasons why, I've been caught now because I just revealed that I had undeleted my OkCupid, which is still not going well. But I was gonna say that I like to organically meet people, and the reason why I deleted my OkCupid page is because I recognize that a lot of times when you meet people from, you know, these dating sites, you're not really meeting people who could integrate into your life. You're meeting people who often exist completely outside of your own experience and completely outside of your world, and you've got to either bring them in or you've got to come into their world, right? And I just kind of got tired of that and decided that I wanted to sort of try to date people who are actually in my world, right? And so I'm not going to go out of my way to find a trans guy to prove a point, you know? I would rather, if I met a trans guy and we connected and there's mutual attraction, see where that goes. But I still don't quite know where it could go or where it would go. I don't know. And I'm still afraid of sort of putting a trans guy into that situation. So that's what I had to say on that. So I'm very, very curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. I would love to hear from trans men if you've been in similar situations I've been in where you date somebody who is attracted to you who just can't do it. Because I've heard that a lot with trans women, but I have not heard that a lot with trans men. I'm very, very curious if you've been in that situation. And I'm also curious to hear how you guys think about what I said. Because honestly, I don't want it to sound ultimately problematic because I would date trans men. I just haven't met one that I would. You know, I've met several trans men. I think I meet the most transgender men when I do my speaking, you know, because that's just where people go. But in general, I just don't run into them. And so that's a big reason why it hasn't happened. Anyway, I would love to get your true tea, so please leave your true brew in the comment box below. Right now, you're looking at 2 videos if you want to continue to sip tea with me, and I hope that you do that. And also, if you enjoyed this video, you have in the corner several ways that you can send me a tip if that's what you want to do. And I would highly suggest that you support me on Patreon again so that you can get content weeks in advance. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.